Tariffs and threats of tariffs are making for uncertainty in many economic sectors. Is that uncertainty impacting U.S. supply chains? And if so, how so? Joining us now is Dale Rogers from ASU's W.P. Carey School of Business and our go-to guy when it comes to supply chain issues. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be with you.
When it comes to the supply chain, let's just take what happened today. Steel and aluminum from everyone, from the world coming in. What does that do to supply chains?
Well, if you were sourcing steel, I mean, there's not that much capacity in the U.S. You know, steel used to be the most important commodity in the U.S. People thought it drove the economy back in the 40s and the 50s. But the truth is that the traditional big steel plants have been, you know, absolutely inefficient for a long time. And what happened is the steel has migrated out of the U.S. So, you know, and the other thing is that are we going to protect the steel industry so that the steel gets put into components that are done overseas and then comes back? That's just inefficient. And a huge thing is the building sector, where we already saw with Canadian lumber tariffs back in 2018 and steel, those prices of housing go up. I know your next guest is going to talk about you know, the unhoused and so on. This is going to make the problem even worse. It doesn't really make sense, but in certain areas politically, Pennsylvania, for example, you know, steel tariffs probably help those workers and those people vote. So.
Tariffs in general, just overall, the tariffs, the threat of tariffs. First of all, does business fully understand the rules? Does anyone really know what's going on?
Well, things are moving too quickly. Yeah, I mean, just really fast. So every day there's a new sort of crisis news story. You know, we know from more than 150 years that tariffs are bad. Truthfully, nobody ever wins a trade war. This is not New York real estate where you can like subdue somebody. A trade war never works. And if you look around the world at economies that are basically closed, that have high tariffs, Brazil, Venezuela, there's a bunch of them, you know, we don't want to trade places with them. And so for supply chain folks, it just doesn't make sense, I think.
I know that things like upstream and downstream are big terms and big things to look at when it comes to the supply chain. What do those terms mean, and how would tariffs affect them?
Well, downstream is like in front of you, so your customer and your customer's customer, so on. Upstream is the other direction, where you're kind of going back in the supply chain to eventually dirt and water and raw materials. So, you know, supply chain managers are used to dealing with disruptions at pretty much every day, but these tariffs are unnecessary disruptions, and there's nobody running these things, running supply chains, that think, you know, tariffs are a good idea. Nobody does.
Okay, will we see more shipping in bulk, transportation in bulk, as opposed to single items? Is that something that we could see?
Well, the de minimis tariff, so the way, like Temu and Shine, who have gained a big foothold in the U.S., coming shipping directly from China, and also a lot of like small business folks are shipping directly from China to the U.S. somehow using, you know, UPS or FedEx or something. And that's actually made things more efficient. But there's a lot of folks that are interested in stopping some of that very low-cost stuff. And so we're closing that de minimis loophole, which is a big change. And all of a sudden, things are going to come a lot slower if it's coming directly from China.
I was going to ask about reducing speed to market, and if we see, I don't know, more air cargo rates, more air cargo, less air cargo?
This is going to be disastrous for air cargo, actually, because, you know, there's sort of I mean, it doesn't always hold, but the ratio between ocean and air is about 10 to 1. So it costs 10 times as much to ship it on an airplane. Well, what are you shipping on an airplane? Small packages, avoiding tariffs, and you know, this is going to be really, if you own stock in an air cargo company, these are not good days.
What does it mean for inventory in the U.S.?
Well, we saw a movement of inventory in before Trump got inaugurated, trying to expedite stuff in, but that stuff's only going to last forever. And the uncertainty around it, we knew that there was going to be an East Coast dock worker strike. So, we sort of prepared for that because but with this, it's kind of up in the air. We don't know exactly what's coming.
So what does it mean for consumers? What do we watch for here?
Well, stuff is going to cost more. We saw it before with the tariffs back in 2018. The president back then said they were very successful. I don't think anybody thinks they were, honestly. But we're gonna see costs go up. And it's unpredictable what costs are going to go up.
Costs go up because of shortages and these kinds of things?
No, it's more if inputs cost more. And there's an amplifier effect. So if you put a 25% tariff on steel, that 25% gets increased as it rolls downstream in the supply chain. So there's like an amplifier effect. So it doesn't say 25%, 25%, 25%, unless somebody eats it somehow, eats the cost of it. But you're going to see that cost get larger as it moves. And, in some cases it might be 50% increase in price at the, for the consumer. Hopefully that's not the case. And hopefully this is just messing around and we're going to take them off like we did the Canadian and Mexico tariffs. But it's introducing uncertainty. It's hard to understand why that's a good thing.
Last question real quickly. Is this unprecedented? Have we ever seen anything like this?
Well, in the modern era, yes, because we've all known for a long time since the Smoot-Hawley tariffs that actually helped bring on the Depression. If you go back to 1929, stock market crashes, and then Smoot-Hawley tariffs made everything much worse, and that really precipitated the Great Depression. So nobody's wanted to replicate that since then.
Dale Rogers, W.P. Carey School of Business. Always a pleasure. Good to see you.
Great to see you, Ted.